Hey guys, welcome back to the Spruce and Linen channel. I'm Janelle and today is another Weave With Me video and I'm going to show you how I came up with this little woven Christmas ornament. So let's get started. Did you know that you can learn how to make this exact woven stocking by joining Patreon? Our tutorial club features a new full project tutorial every single month. You can head over to patreon.com/spruceandlinen or click the link in the description box below to learn more. These cute little ornament looms in front of me are from our shop. You can find them at spruceandlinen.com. I usually have these available from September to the beginning of December. So last year I did a little ornament tutorial on this square one. So this year I want to do a different one. And I think we're gonna do the little house because I love this one so much. One of the challenges I would say with these little ornament looms are they're little. So it can be really hard to try to balance trying to add some interest and detail without going too overboard because they are very small. They're little to work on and you don't have a lot of space. I grabbed a few materials and these three yarns are loops and threads. This one is the Lush Alpaca. These two are Cozy Wool. These are like a Michaels brand. And then this one is Lion brand Woolies Thick and Quick. And then this I've had for years, but it's just like a pom-pom trim from the fabric store. And I picked up a bunch of yards. I think it was intended to be a trim on like a table runner and I never used it. So I thought it could be really fun to try to incorporate it into this little piece. Now, like I said, I find it hard sometimes working on these really tiny things because you are tempted to be like, oh, I need to do all this stuff. But then you're like, but wait, I don't have enough room to do all the things on this tiny little piece. So right now I'm thinking stripes. These, these little ornaments that are straight up and down and square on the bottom are really great for doing stripe type things. And then the round one is where you can get a little bit more organic because there is, out of all of them, there's the most space to weave on in terms of like width on this one. But I want to do the house. And so I'm thinking something striped so that we can get some different things in here without it being, without it feeling super chaotic because it's just gonna be little stripes. I really like the idea of staying neutral, but I did grab some more, traditional Christmas colors. One thing I will say, I was originally thinking of doing just like red and green, which is great, but most of us probably have green Christmas trees. And so then I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't use green because I don't want it to sort of just fade into the tree. So all I'm kind of doing here is like laying stuff out. Could I do, maybe the beige, white, and red would be really nice and that would really jump out on a green Christmas tree. Now, if you had one of those like gorgeous all white Christmas trees, I feel like that's where you could really bring the green in and it would stand out, or maybe just a different shade of green. So like I said, even before I warp this little loom, I just kind of want to lay out and get an idea of what I might want to do. I do think like these three colors I'm really liking together. I think I would probably keep the red fairly minimal because compared to the other two colors, like it really pops. And then I probably won't even use the off-white since this trim is like white and the yarn is more of like an off-white. It could work, but I don't know if I want to go that route, especially since I already have this beige. So I kind of like the idea of doing like some plain weave and then this pom-pom trim, and then maybe we could bring in like, I don't know, like maybe a sumac stitch. Maybe the beige should be sumac. Or maybe when I get to the red, we'll almost go more into like the pick and pick and do like a beige, red, beige, red, beige. And then go back to the pom-pom garland. Let's give that a try. I'm gonna grab some warp string. So the warp string I'm using is also from my shop. It's called 4/8 Natural Cotton. This is just a really great standard warp string. And I also sell a bunch of our colors of warp string on these little spool cards. This is about 25 yards, which would definitely be enough to do, you know, one of each of the ornaments at least, maybe more, probably more. So when figuring out how much string we need, basically what I like to do is just like hold this out like this. We need some to tie on the end, and I'm going along each of the holes and just stringing this out. Now that I'm at the top, I could just double this and then add a little bit, because the last thing you want to do is be short, because that's just going to make your life super annoying. So I'm going to string it through here. Now you can use a needle for stringing this if you have the correct size, but I've made the holes big enough on these so that you can just kind of push the yarn through, or the warp string through. So we've gone from the bottom up here. You can flip it over and you're going to bring your warp string back through here. Then after that, we're going to go straight down to this hole. And again, flipping it over and going to the one beside it. So basically we're going up and down and side to side. So again, now that I've gotten this in here, I'm going back up this way, flip it over, and move up to the next one. When it comes to weaving on these little ornament frames or other kind of shape looms, your tension is less crucial than when you're weaving on a regular frame loom that you're going to take the piece off of. And that's because the frame itself is part of the structure of this piece. Now, the couple of things that you want to watch out for that is like normal weaving tension is you don't want to make it super, super loose, and you don't want to make it super, super tight. When it's really tight, it's going to make the weaving process a lot more difficult. Everything's going to scrunch in and it's going to be just a lot harder and less fun to weave. But if you make it too loose, what can happen, especially if you use a lot of texture, is it's going to kind of want to sag in the middle if your tension is too loose. I get a lot of questions about, you know, can you do a video about tension, or how do you know when your tension's right? A lot of it comes with trial and error. It's very hard through a screen to describe to you how tight the tension is, but I would just say, you know, like, you're gonna see me tighten this up later, but let's look at this right now where it's at. So right now, I would say this is a bit loose. So I'm barely touching on it and it has a lot of give. Now, if I was trying to weave something super thick into this, then having it a little looser would be okay. Something to keep in mind when we're talking about tension is, what are you weaving? Because that can really dictate what your tension is going to be. So for instance, if you're weaving, let's say an overshot pattern, I would say you would want your tension to be a bit on the tighter side, because in an overshot pattern, we're generally skipping over a lot of warp strings and then we're doing plain weave just in between. Now, it's not that you want it super, super tight, but it can be a little bit on the tighter side. Whereas if you're going to be weaving with a lot of thick merino wool roving, that tighter tension is going to make it more challenging to weave. If you're going to do a little bit of both, then that's where that sort of happy medium comes in. And a lot of it comes with practice and getting familiar with what feels good, which is the same in so many fiber crafts. When you think about crocheting or knitting, that tension comes with practice, the correct tension. And sometimes you have to, you know, have a few pieces that don't work out perfectly to figure that out. And I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, but it is kind of the reality of a lot of these crafts is you get better as you go. I can see now already I'm gonna have way more warp string than I needed. It's usually what happens, but again, I would rather have quite a bit extra than not enough and have to like try to tie it off in the middle of it. So now the whole thing is warped. First, before I adjust any tension or anything, I'm gonna tie off this first string, which I could have done at the beginning, I just didn't. I'm basically just pulling up this loop that's right next to my starting string. And it would probably be easier again if I was using a needle. But I did just want to kind of show you this if you don't have the right needle to go through these holes. And I'm just going to tie a little knot here. So now I'm just tightening up that tension. Oh yeah, that feels a lot better. I might have to do that one more time. And again, I'm not reaming on it, but I definitely don't want it to be so loose that it's gonna wanna sag, which tension that's too tight and tension that's too loose, both are gonna make it harder to weave. So that's feeling a little bit better. I'm just gonna make sure that this knot feels tight enough and just go over that with one more knot. And that should be good there. All right, so now I'm gonna trim that off, just letting it have a little bit of a tail, and that'll just kind of hang out back there. Now, once again, I'm gonna check the tension. It still feels a little bit loose to me. So I'm gonna see if I can tighten that up a little bit more. And again, keeping in mind that as we weave, it is going to tighten up a little bit. Okay, so let's see that that feels like. Yeah, I feel like that feels all right. What you can do, I'm gonna be weaving probably with this little yarn needle. Oh yeah, so that feels pretty good to me there. It's not crazy tight and it's not super loose either. So now I'm gonna do this the smarter way. And I'm just gonna do the same thing I did on the other end, but I'm using this loop now, if I can get through all the strings. So now that's what this looks like, all warped. This end feels a little bit tight, so I can kind of try to loosen that up. I think that'll be okay. All right, now I'm ready to weave. Now, could I use this needle? Actually, I probably can, at least for the first half. So I'm gonna use one of our maple tapestry needles. I am obsessed with these, that's why I make them. And they're just really great if you wanna check them out. Links for everything in the description box below. So, as I mentioned before, I think I maybe want to try just like some plain weave and then the pom-poms. And I might even let the tails of the pom-poms stick out on the side a little bit, because I think those might be a bit of a challenge to tuck in later. But maybe I'll leave it long so that we can decide after. And I'm just gonna take a chunk of this yarn and I'm gonna come up from the back. I wanna go over this first string. And I'm just doing that so I can have the tail tucked in the back, like so. We'll deal with those tails after. Then I'm just gonna do some plain weave, which is just over one, under one warp string. Now, the other thing about having tension that isn't too tight, and see, I might change my plan right here. So personally, when I weave these, I like to try to cover up the holes at least a little bit. That's a little tricky, obviously, to do with plain weave. So could I either, like that might hide the warp strings better. I'm gonna try using this needle with this. And that's why these are called Weave With Me and not tutorial, because I really wanted to try doing these videos where I'm like showing you some of the trial and error, because I think it can be really helpful just to show you that, you know, this is the creative process. It's a lot of trial and error. So I'm just kind of pointing those. See, I don't think that's gonna really work either. Not great anyway. It is kind of cute on the bottom though, isn't it? Actually, that is kind of covering up the holes. Oh, that's really cute. Okay. So I really like that. So I think that's going to be the bottom. And now I'm wondering, like, could I do that on an angle up here as well? So that, like, you know what I mean? Like the pom-poms are at the top as well. That might be cute. We'll see if I can do that. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now I need to decide. I'm gonna just leave this tail here for now. I'm gonna cut another tail here, even though it's like potentially wasteful of this super cute little trim. I wanna be able to decide later if I want the ends to be tucked in or not. Now I'm thinking, so this pom-pom trim has this, you know, this little trim piece and then the pom-poms. I think I'm going to do my next row of plain weave the same as that pom-pom row and see if the yarn will better cover up that little trim part. So let's try that. I think that that looks really good because we're really covering up that trim, and now it just looks like straight up pom-poms, which I think I'm a fan of. I'm gonna go in with one more row of this. I really like this pom-pom stuff with the beige. So now I guess my question is, where am I going? Where am I going with this? Like, I don't know if I want to do the red. So I could do something with the red here, go back with the beige, and then go back with the pom-pom. It's kind of cute. But I also just really love, like, the simplicity of this look. It's so cute. And this, okay, let's talk about what's happening in my brain right now. Because to you, you're just like, yeah, then just do that. This is that overcomplicating thing I was talking about. I'm like, is this too simple? Like, is this just not interesting because it's so easy? And that's always the challenge, isn't it? Where you're just like, if it's this easy, is it good enough? Or if it's this simple, is it, I don't know. Second guessing is such an issue for me. And I'm sure pretty much anyone who does anything creative ever would probably agree with me that you're just like always second guessing, like, ooh, is this enough? Is it too much? Is it, you know, and these are the questions that help you make the design decisions, but they can also just, you know, in a way hinder you because you're like, if it's this easy and this simple, is it beautiful? I actually really think it is. I'm kind of thinking I might do, let's try one more row. Oh, I don't want to do that though. I'd have to do two. because my thought is that I kind of want to weave this really nice and tight so that we're not really seeing the warp strings at all. So then my question is, do I want to go in with more beige before I go in with more pom-poms? Or do I like sort of the thinner row of the beige and then the pom-poms on top of that? I really like it though. You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of like a gingerbread house, because we've got the beige kind of as the background and these little pom-pom, like that white icing decoration, which I really like. And so I think this is what I'm doing. I think I'm not gonna like make this too complicated. And I mean, again, I really feel like little ornaments like this they're supposed to be fun. And I think when they can be a little bit more simple and sort of a quick and easy craft, I think that's really fun. So I think that's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm gonna try. I really don't wanna have to try to tuck in this pom-pom in the back. So I'm actually gonna try cutting it. So let's see how that goes. I'm just gonna cut it right against the edge, not on the pom-pom, just beyond it. Oh, I think that'll be fine. Oh, it's so cute. Okay. All right. One new thing that I haven't ever tried actually is weaving with stuff like this little like pom-pom trim stuff. So I like that that's a new thing. So again, I'm going to cut this a little bit longer just because it's going to be a little bit easier to weave and I'd rather like cut it off after. And let's get this next row of pom-poms in. I hope you guys are loving these weave with me's as much as I am, because I think they are giving me a good creative challenge, but also because I'm filming and because I'm often on, you know, a bit of a timeline when I'm filming, it also kind of forces me to go with the flow a little bit more. And like just what just happened is like not to second guess myself so much to the point where I'm like, I can't do this because this is too easy. Sometimes we want easy. Sometimes easy is more fun. And I know that some of you watching this might be, you know, very beginner weavers. And even if you aren't, you know, weaving something easy is still really fun regardless. Okay, so I'm going to go, again, the same plain weave row that I just did with the pom-pom. So that was over, under, over, under, over. So I'm going in that same row instead of opposite. So usually plain weave you do over, under, over, and then the next row you would be going under, over, under instead. But this one I'm just continuing on with that same row, and then it really hides the trim and lets those little pom-poms stick out instead. And I love this. And I think especially like if you have a goal of, you know, making a bunch of these ornaments, simple is definitely going to be your best friend, because if you make them too complicated, then it gets a lot more tiresome making multiples. I'm still utilizing the arch kind of method when I'm weaving plain weave on even on this tiny little ornament, because I do want my sides to end up straight. So I'm just giving myself some extra slack out in the center and then sort of beating it down. And you don't necessarily need a comb. Like you could go in with your needle instead, like that, just as an option if you're not wanting to buy, you know, extra supplies to do one of these. Now I'm gonna try cutting this again. And then on the other side, so I didn't cut my beige string. I just kept going, so you can see this loop underneath, which now is kind of what it's doing, is it's causing this to sort of stick out. So right now I'm trying to figure out if I trim this off, is that gonna look, you know, kind of weird or not? I actually think it's okay. So I think I'll just keep going. So now I need to go back in with more of the pom-poms. And so basically I'm just like, I'm doing 2 rows of the beige and then the pom-pom, 1 row of the pom-poms. So let's try this. I feel like you could probably accomplish a similar look if you didn't have the pom-poms, but maybe with like an Egyptian knot, which gives sort of that bit of a little bit of a ball looking knot. But I'm a big fan of this pom-pom, and I feel like this time of year, you know, if you're watching this in November, it's probably gonna be fairly easy to find something like this. All right, so I'm looking at this again. Are those sticking up too much? My thoughts are that if that really bugs you, I would probably just go back later and like maybe dab some sort of like a tiny little bit of glue or something. Normally I wouldn't use glue on my weavings, but this is like such a tiny little piece. That might be the best solution. The one thing I do like about the pom-pom staying on the surface more so is it is like giving us a really nice edge and sort of covering up the wood if that's what you want to go for. As I'm getting closer to top, it's getting a little bit more challenging to use this needle. So I'm gonna go to the plastic needle, because the one thing about the plastic needle that is nice in this scenario, wood needle is very rigid, plastic needle has some give. So that's gonna make my life just a little bit more easy once we're getting into the more tightness of this little tiny loom. It does get more challenging as you get to the top, but it's doable. Okay, so now as the loom is starting to go up, I need to change where I'm putting this pom-pom stuff. So now instead of ending on these 2 strings, I'm only gonna use these ones as my far end strings because we have to start going up with the loom. So I think this is a good place to start that. Again, taking a piece that's too long to make it a little bit easier to weave. This time, we need to go under this string. So we're at the second hole and we're going under that. So we're still doing opposite of the previous row. And we're just not going to use those far 2 strings now. It's getting a little bit more challenging, as you can see. So that looks pretty good. I'm gonna leave these long for a minute here and get a row of plain weight over top of that. This edge isn't as nice as this edge, which kind of bugs me, but in an effort not to be cutting off of our beige yarn every single section, I think it's just not that big of a deal. So it's getting a lot more challenging now to weave. It's definitely needing that flexible needle to get us through. So like, I may have been able to do the tension a little bit looser for this reason, because now it's like, it's getting really difficult. I can find the end. And I guess this is another reason to keep these really nice and simple, because once you get into this teeny tiny spot, it is quite challenging to get it all correct. So using something like plain weave is going to make it a lot easier than if it were something more complex. So now I've moved on to the next hole in. So every row I'm kind of like reducing the amount of warp strings I'm using, because we've got to, again, follow that angle the loom is going through. So that goes there. All right, so I'm just tucking this string into the back since it's, we're out of yarn, which is unfortunate because I only have this much, like, not very much more to weave. All right, so now we're gonna try to get, I'm gonna say probably this might be our last row of the pom-poms, because it's gonna get trickier and trickier, as I said, to get them in there, but we'll give it a try. All right, so it's getting quite tight up here in this small section. So now is kind of the point where I need to decide, like, am I gonna try to get another little, I feel like I should get one more little section of the pom-poms in there. Hopefully this just goes to show you too how much I unweave. Because sometimes you weave something and, you know, right away you're like, oh no, that wasn't quite right. Let's try that again. So, still gonna use this third to the top hole, the string that's around that one. See, now I'm kind of feeling like this pom-pom row should have gone, yeah, because right now it's just under like one string. And I'm going to, I'm just sticking my needle under one more string from where the pom-poms were and see if I can tuck it in there. I know I'm not explaining this very well. It's very difficult to see, but just gonna shove that in there. All right, what's going on now? Okay. I think that'll work. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, if I can find it. Okay, we've almost got this finished. Basically just the rest of this way, I'm just doing plain weave. Basically what I'm doing here is, as I'm weaving in this little top part of plain weave, I'm just kind of loosening it to see if I can kind of let that cover those holes a little bit better. And then I kind of want to see, I think I'm going to try to fish this actual yarn through this hole. I'm using a different needle, of course. Let's see if I have one that'll fit through there. Cool, I got it. All right, so now I just need to tuck in these couple of ends. I'm confident in this knot staying now, so I'm just gonna trim that a little bit shorter. Then I'm just going to use my yarn needle again. And I think all I'm gonna do here is tuck this string here. I just went under a couple of warp strings where the pom-poms had been. It's a little bit tricky. Okay. And then once it's under a couple, it can be trimmed off. And you can see that that sits nice and flush under there. So I'm just going to quickly do that with all of these strings. This yarn is a little bit hairy. It has some alpaca in it. But this is the finished piece, well, almost finished. I think it's really cute. I like that it's simple. As I said, I think if these little, you know, the pom-pom sticking up is something that would bother you if you want to make the same piece, I would totally just go in with like a tiny little dab of glue and just like push this down so that it stays where you want it to. And that would completely solve that issue in a really simple way. So for the hanging string, I'm using this, it's like a woven cotton string. I think it's waxed as well. Obviously you can use anything you want for this. I just really like the look of it because it almost like, it's a little bit to me like it looks like it could be leather, even though it's definitely not leather. And I really like that. So I'm just kind of picking a length. I'm gonna tie a overhand knot on one end. So it's just sticking up a little bit like this. Then I'm going to fish this through the back of the hole and just loop our knot back through and pull it to the top. And then now we have our finished ornament. What I love about this little simple pattern that I did is I think it would look so great on any of these looms and just be a really fun addition to a Christmas tree. If you like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell to get notifications when I post new videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.